Hello, I'm Matt Galloway, and this is The Current Podcast.
In any complicated, high-stakes negotiation, you can get unexpected twists and turns, and you have to keep your cool during those situations. It doesn't pay to be upset. Emotions don't carry you very far. And we had made progress, to repeat, and we stand by the progress that had been made. The Government of Canada does. And we are ready, when appropriate, to pick that up.
That is Prime Minister Mark Carney in Kuala Lumpur this morning, answering a reporter's question about whether he is upset with Ontario Premier Doug Ford. A $75 million TV ad campaign that Ontario's provincial government has put out seems to have enraged U.S. President Donald Trump. First, Trump cut off trade negotiations. Then this weekend, he said he was slapping an additional 10% tariff on Canada. And he says he doesn't want to talk to Mark Carney for a long time. All of this is playing out as both leaders are in Asia for international meetings. And it comes just over a week before the Prime Minister unveils his first budget, one that is expected to be, in the Prime Minister's words, bold. To talk about all of this, we have called in our national affairs panel. Rosemary Barton is CBC's chief political correspondent. Stephanie Levitz is a senior reporter in the Globe and Mail's Ottawa Bureau, and Ryan Tumilty is a political reporter for the Toronto Star. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
Rosie, I want to start with you. Donald Trump was asked by reporters about meeting with Mark Carney, and he said, I don't want to meet with him. I'm not going to be meeting with him for a long time. How bad is this moment for Canada?
I think it's a very challenging moment for the country. I think it is a very challenging moment for the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister's response, well, not response, I'm not sure if he knew that Donald Trump had said that, but his comment this morning, I thought, was pretty indicative of the ice in his veins as well. He said, the president knows I am available, indicating, I think, that Canada is not going to be trying to put something else on the table or take something off the table to get Donald Trump back there. This feels to me like a moment where Mark Carney's so-called impressive negotiating skills are going to be put to the test. And it sounds to me like he's willing to wait it out a bit. Things were close. I mean, we had been told, I know the Globe and Mail said possibly sometime during this summit, something would be resolved. I had been told within weeks. So this has derailed things considerably and I think really damaged their relationship. And through no fault of Mark Carney's, let's be clear. It wasn't anything that he did that has led us to where we are right now.
Just quickly, Rosie, this additional 10% tariff, what is our understanding of what that is going to look like, whether it targets, all goods from Canada, just a select group?
We don't know very much about it, and the Prime Minister didn't seem to know much about it either today. Generally, the Canadian government has been reticent to say too much until they see something on paper. It sounds like it's an additional 10% tariff on things that are already tariffed. So that would mean all things that are non-CUSMA compliant, and I guess the sectoral tariffs. But this is the nature of who and what we're dealing with. He just fires off these ideas without anyone really understanding what they are, including people inside Trump's own administration.
Steph, Doug Ford may have now pulled these ads, but that doesn't mean we can't play a little bit of one of them to help folks understand a little bit more about what we're talking here. It does use quotes from the former U.S. President, Ronald Reagan. Here we go.
Throughout the world, there's a growing realization that the way to prosperity for all nations is rejecting protectionist legislation and promoting fair and free competition. America's jobs and growth are at stake.
It's been interesting, Steph. A lot of leaders across the country, different levels of government, have stood by Ford's decision to play these ads, but he did ultimately decide to back down on airing them. Was that the right move?
Well, I mean, I'll take a counterpoint to Rosie, who said this is happening through no fault of Mark Carney's own. I would disagree slightly. It seems that the Team Canada spirit that was, really characteristic of the early days of tensions with the United States has fallen apart a little bit. And Mr. Carney is, after all, captain of Team Canada. So if the provinces are going off in their own directions, I mean, we have British Columbia, the British Columbia government's launching its own less perhaps provocative ad about softwood lumber in the next little while, one has to wonder why. Do they feel that they've got a good cop, bad cop, or, bon cop, bad cop thing going here? Was it the right thing for Mr. Ford to back down? I mean, he's backed down before, and Mr. Trump backs down too. There's like folks in the United States who always say the minute he's going to do something, then he chickens out, right? Maybe this is some kind of game of chicken that we're playing here, but it's one that's pretty potentially disastrous for the Canadian economy. And one wonders, did Premier Ford and Mr. Carney have a conversation before these ads? Did they game out the potential that this would have any backlash? And if they didn't do that, why not?
Well, it was interesting, Ryan, this morning the Prime Minister was asked in French about, sort of what he thought about all of this. And he said, we, the federal government, decided not to do ads. It was a choice. It was obvious for us that this was not something we should do. When we look forward, Ryan, I mean, Steph's raising this question of Team Canada sort of fraying a little bit. Do you think that this has caused a deeper problem within Canada, within Team Canada?
Yeah, I mean, we are getting to the point where we are allegedly close to a deal. We'll see if we're still close to a deal after the president calms down. But that deal is going to be lopsided in some ways for Canada. We know that, the lumber industry may not be treated the same as the steel and aluminum sectors. We know the auto sector may be treated differently than all of those sectors. And Canada is a place where some of those sectors matter a lot more. David Eby in BC has been raising the stakes and raising the issue of the lumber sector because it's so central to his economy and so central to the people who live in his province. A steel or aluminum only deal really doesn't help people in, New Brunswick or BC or anywhere where lumber is a major industry. It was always going to be this way. The closer we got to a deal, the more potential there was for someone to lose out on part of that deal.
Rosie, if we look at Mark Carney's to-do list, right? He is overseas, ASEAN, APEC, these international summits. Does the number one thing on his to-do list have to be to try to get some FaceTime with Donald Trump to bring down the temperature? Or does he need to be putting more of his eggs in the basket of building these new international trade ties to make up some of what Canada is losing as this trade relationship with the U.S. seems to get worse and worse?
Listen, I'll say what I think he's doing as opposed to what he should be doing. I mean, you would think he would try to get in front of Donald Trump at some point at APEC over when they meet in South Korea later this week. What I think he might be doing, though, just based on what he's been saying and the way he is positioning himself, it is not necessarily to do that, but to demonstrate to the world and that part of the world in particular that Canada is a quote unquote reliable trading partner, that it's ready to make deals. He announced not only a deal to accelerating a free trade deal for ASEAN, but also the Philippines. He indicated today he's going to meet with President Xi of China. So it feels like he is trying to show that diversifying trade is obviously good for Canada's economy, but also maybe trying to demonstrate to the U.S. president and others that while Canada can't function without a trading relationship with the United States, it will seek others. It will seek others and places to sell our goods elsewhere. And it feels to me like that's a message to Donald Trump. You can either come back to the table or you're going to be left behind. And maybe that's too simplistic, but that does seem to be the tactic he's taking in this moment.
Steph, let's take a moment to talk about one of those other relationships, the relationship with China, because we do expect that Prime Minister Carney, he acknowledged it this morning, hopes to meet with China's President Xi Jinping. It's extraordinary how much this relationship seems to be changing over the course of a few years' time, right? I mean, we don't have to think back that far to remember Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor being detained by China. We spoke to Michael Kovrig this weekend on the program I host, The House, concerns about foreign interference. What is your sense, Steph, of how much Prime Minister Carney is ready to just leave that era of tension with China behind?
It's an excellent question, because if we go back to the trade dynamics, right? Right now we're in a spat with China, to put that mildly, about EV tariffs and about canola, right? And it's very punitive for the canola sector in this country. It is not clear whether Mr. Carney intends to lift those tariffs or not. One would presume he's going to come out of this meeting with China with some kind of deal with that respect. But I guess, for decades now, let's say, Canadian prime ministers have said you can do business with China and encourage their record on human rights, encourage them to be better. And that's never worked. And the question is the Canadian public have so much of an appetite for growing our economy that we're willing to sort of cover our eyes and stick our fingers in our ears and say, la, 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 forget about the Michaels? Like, are we just going to abandon that? Is that where we are? Because that's remarkable, if so.
Yeah, certainly something to watch. And Ryan, when the Prime Minister spoke this morning, he talked about part of the response to this moment. Yes, new trade ties with other countries, but it is also the budget that he is putting forward. And he has been laying the groundwork for this, particularly over the course of the last week. He gave a speech where he talked about the sacrifices that the country is going to have to make as it prepares to transform the economy. What do we know about what he means when he talks about sacrifices?
I mean, we don't know a lot yet. We're all waiting for November 4th. But we do know, that he instructed his ministers to find 15% worth of cuts in all of their departments over the course of the summer. We know they did that work. From what I have heard, that most of them took that work seriously. They weren't just looking for, proposing a cut to tax cuts or ending the musical ride or the snowbirds or something else incredibly politically unpopular. Departments took that seriously. But, for all, the Prime Minister has discussed this as something that could be done through attrition or retirements. This is going to mean job cuts. You can't reduce the public service this deeply without doing job cuts. So that's going to be part of it. And I think he's setting up the public for the idea that, unlike the Trudeau government, which was aggressively expanding social programs, he may just sit still with the programs we have. And he may not be as generous with some of the programs that we have.
Rosie, the Prime Minister talks about taking a risk, that Canada needs to, swing for the fences. Fortune favors the bold. How much of a political risk is this budget for him?
I mean, there's some risk, certainly. I talked to the government House leader on Friday, who seems to think he, at this stage, doesn't have the votes for the government to survive. I think the votes will appear, or people will not show up, and the budget will pass. But that being said, we are not in a space where the government is actively negotiating with parties to make sure it gets their support. This is Mark Carney's budget. With all due respect to the finance minister, this is his budget, and this is his moment to demonstrate to the country what he told us all, what he sold himself on, that he can get Canada in a better position for this moment in time. So it has to do some big, bold things. He's right. And if it doesn't, or I would say if it is disappointing to Canadians for some of the reasons that Ryan alluded to there, I think that, the shine is going to wear off pretty quickly, because you can't, on the one hand, not get any results from Donald Trump, because that's where we are now. There has been no results from this Prime Minister with this president, and put forward a budget that is it's big spending and making cuts, and expect Canadians to suck all that up. That is going to become a political problem for him, even if it doesn't result in an election right away. Canadians will start to doubt the things that the Prime Minister said he could do. So I think this budget is, regardless of whether the votes are there or not, I think it is a huge test for the Prime Minister.
Steph, regardless of whether the votes or not are there, where might those votes come from? What do you think the Liberals' best chances of getting this budget to pass?
It feels like the best chance is the New Democrats. And I say that not necessarily because of history, which has, shown us that the New Democrats have been willing to vote with the Liberal government time and time again. But in this case of the opposition parties, it is only the New Democrats that haven't come right out and been, a hard no. I'm not saying that the no that the Bloc Québécois have given is a hard no, like perhaps they can be convinced. The opposition Conservatives, meanwhile, official opposition parties don't vote for budgets, government budgets. It's like not in their DNA to do that. It's how Parliament functions. And so I think we circle right back around, and with total respect to Elizabeth May and the Green Party and their one vote, we'll see where that goes. I wonder a lot with this budget, the New Democrats were so thoroughly perhaps politically burned by their previous agreements with the Liberal government that one wonders how they stick handle this one. Is there something afoot that won't be the same as, New Democrats voting for the budget? Maybe it's just that they don't vote at all for the budget. So this will be interesting, and it's definitely crunch time this week here in Ottawa. With the Prime Minister, of course, is overseas, but it'll be up to the House Leader and probably others to broker some kind of arrangement to figure out how this is all going to go through in due course.
Ryan, I don't hear a sense of panic among the National Affairs panel. Does that tell us that, that there is no world where this could wind up tumbling into an election?
The National Affairs panel enjoys a good election as part of that. I also think, I don't think there is a strong chance that we tumble into an election, although people have been wrong about that before. Just ask Joe Clark. Mm-hmm. But I think I agree with Steph that I think the NDP may find a way to support this budget. It's hard for me to imagine them jumping into an election without having fundraised the dollars, or more importantly, picked a leader to run in that election. So all they have to do is not show up to see this pass. I imagine there are some Conservatives who will look at this budget, and I also agree with Steph that official opposition doesn't generally vote for it. But I think there are some Conservatives who may look at it and say, this actually isn't that bad. This is the kind of thing we might have written. So I think there's a possibility there. But I'm not planning to be on a campaign trail next month.
Rosie, it is a moment where there is some obvious instability. I guess what would you say to Canadians, folks listening right now who are feeling a bit anxious about the state of Canadian politics?
I get it. I get it. You would think that things would maybe be a little more settled post-election, but this is the nature of the moment that we are in, and that is, I think, largely due to President Trump and the decisions that he has made that have sort of shaken the world in a dramatic way, and I think that has caused some real pressures on people. And the Canadian economy. And I think that it is normal to be anxious and worried right now. And I don't think this budget is going to solve those pressures right away, right? The Prime Minister has indicated that this is going to take time. And I think that's also sort of the crunch moment there that Steph is talking about. For Canadians, like, how long are you willing to wait to see things improve? Because diversifying trade, finding new trading partners, rebuilding the Canadian economy, those are not things that you are going to feel when you have to go buy Christmas presents, right? Mm-hmm. So there's political instability, but I think there's also economic anxiety, and that is something that the government really needs to be communicating to Canadians, that they get that and that they understand that feeling.
Thank you all for helping put it all into context for us. It's a dramatic time, although it always seems to be a dramatic time.
That's why
politics.
We do it.
Thank you so much to our National Affairs panel. Rosemary Barton is the CBC's chief political correspondent and, of course, host of Rosemary Barton Live on CBC News Network. Stephanie Levitz is senior reporter in the Globe and Mail's Ottawa Bureau, and Ryan Tumilty is a political reporter for the Toronto Star.
You've been listening to The Current Podcast. My name is Matt Galloway. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon.